And we're live. Welcome everybody to Virtually Connecting Hangout from OpenEd 16. My name is AK. I am VConnecting 1, your co-host this morning. We're going to do a quick round of introductions, starting first with the room. Take it away.
Hi, on-site buddy. I'm Martin Weller here at OpenEd 16. I'm from the Open University, and I'll let Jim and Rolin introduce themselves.
I'm Jim Luke. I'm economics professor at Lansing Community College, and at least for a while, I'm also part-time. They haven't given it a title, so I'm just the chief instigator, is what I'm claiming for our Open Learning Lab.
And I'm Rolin Moe, and I am the Director of Academic Innovation at Seattle Pacific University. I should probably know because I'm the one with the title, but I don't yet, so we're working through this.
You mean whatever you want it to mean.
It's innovation, yeah, so yes. Whatever we want to put with
it. Dom?
Hi, I'm Dom Pates. I'm at City University of London, so it's halfway through the afternoon for me at the moment. I'm an educational technologist here, and we work with a particular focus on learning spaces and a professional interest in openness. Hey, all.
Hi, you guys. I'm Nadine Abulmat. I'm from the American University in Cairo. I'm connecting from Cairo, Egypt. I'm the online content developer at the Center for Learning and Teaching, so I work with a lot of professors that design online and blended courses for them to develop their online content, and I work with them on making sure they abide by copyright, so a lot of online resources, openness, everything open related, basically. Very happy to be here. Very happy to meet you guys.
Sarah and Lisa?
Hi, I'm Sarah, and we're from the Chicago area. I just started an EdD program at Athabasca, and I'm currently a public librarian, interested in open.
Yeah, and I too am a doctoral student with Athabasca. I'm a kind of fourth year, and I'm looking at how graphic design instructors are extending their studios using the internet and network practices. So.
And I'm virtually connecting co-buddy with AK this morning. My name's Helen DeWard. I'm in Central Ontario, and I work with Faculty of Education with teacher candidates who are about to venture into the profession. So it's really nice to meet you and to hear all about the open conversations that are happening in Richmond. So back to the room, Martin. Talk to us about how things are going.
Okay, good. Thanks, everyone. So I only started this morning, so we've had the first keynotes, keynote from Gardner Campbell, and then a panel on open pedagogy. And I think, I don't know if you guys were here at OpenEd last year, there was a bit of criticism last year that OpenEd seemed to be very focused on products, on resources, on open textbooks in particular. And Robin DeRosa was one of the people who sort of criticised that and said that we should be talking more about open pedagogy. So I think, fair play, I think to David Wiley, that panel session was a direct response to that feedback from last year. So I don't know if you guys want to say what you felt about so far.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that that Gardner's keynote was the same. It was provocative, certainly. Started with a wonderful video montage, and then really kind of took aim at some of the administrative and structural aspects of what we do in education, learning objectives, rubrics, versus insight was really the word that Gardner kept coming back to as how do we help students gain insight? How do we create the space, or allow the space rather than create, for students to gain insight, versus all these metrics and processes that we seem to want to overload it with. And I know that I'm interested to see the dissonance between what Gardner was saying and the people in the field whose schools are more and more relying on syllabi having learning objectives and the necessity of rubrics in these places. I hope that the emergent conversation that did bring into play. To want very simple 5-step BuzzFeed solutions, and Gardner went out of his way to make sure we didn't provide any of those.
Yeah, I would reinforce what Rolin said, and coming from one of those schools, feels like ground zero for the conflict that you just described, where what Gardner talked about was really inspiring for me. But I could also hear, I mean, it was unfortunate that I couldn't have my provost and some deans and some other folks there in the room that way, because I'd figured they'd either be convinced or their heads would explode. Either way, probably move the thing forward. But yeah, because we're at ground zero, that kind of stuff, where we're being forced very heavily, particularly at a community college. And for those of you not from the U.S., community colleges in the U.S. are kind of strange beasts. We're usually one part 2-year technical programs, but we're also about 2/3 generally the first 2 years of full university. So folks go to the community college and then transfer to university and do their last 2 years. It's a lot cheaper that way for a lot of students. But we're under enormous pressure to lock down syllabi, to lock down student learning outcomes, to make sure that everything's absolutely measurable, assess, and just really bundle it together into that kind of locked down LMS type stuff.
I think, although I pretty much agree with everything Gardner said, I'll just do kind of devil's advocate thing as well. But I think there's also pushback from students, you find as well. You know, students are quite conservative often, I think. You know, it's because they're coming into a space where they feel uncomfortable and vulnerable often, kind of going into this learning process and not sure whether it's for them. I work at their university, and often our learners aren't sure whether higher education is for them. You know, they're not from that kind of background. And I wonder whether some of that kind of more unstructured approach that I guess Gardner was advocating would just put a lot of them off before they even kind of got into that process. And I wonder what you felt about that, whether there's, you know, I don't want the BuzzFeed 5-step plan. You know, it's like, how do you kind of scaffold, for one of the better phrase, the kind of structured learning that I think many new students feel they need and want to take those kind of tentative first steps into education, with also providing room for that kind of insight and aha kind of moments.
Well, you seem.
Well, speaking from my experience on that issue, because that was, and certainly knows, the Open Learning Lab, we're trying to do this kind of, you know, domains. We're doing a domains of one's own program at a community college. And we just kind of started in the last 9 months. But prior to that, there were 2 of us that were off the reservation. I mean, I paid for my own server. I've been doing essentially having students do blogs and do all that kind of stuff for about 3 or 4 years. And another faculty member has been doing the same stuff. And I had thought all along similar concerns. But I think what I've actually found is, and a caveat is, the courses I teach tend to be kind of sophomore level, right, and transfer student oriented. But my experience has been that the students, once you overcome 2 barriers, the first one is a trust issue. Yeah. Because what they're scared of is the grade. It seems fuzzy, and once I can convince them, look, just, you know, work with me. Don't worry about the grade. You know, you do the work. Let's just see what happens, and you'll be okay on grade. Once they start to get past that, they really get into it and like it a whole lot. The other big challenge is time. The students are really the kind of students we have when they're first in their family to university, or, I mean, and most of our students are out working, they're doing something like that. They actually kind of like it, though. They're afraid of it at first, but once they start to dig in and they realize, wait a minute, writing this blog is actually one heck of a lot easier than finding an assignment in the LMS in my other course. So they get past it, but there is some of that. I think more of the fear has actually been faculty and administrators.
My experience would be similar to Jim's on that. I am a disciple of Gary Staker, who I was fortunate enough in my doctoral studies to take a class from. If you're not familiar with him, he's worth following on Twitter. Rather provocative, instrumental in the maker movement, and he has a rubric that he suggests people use when there is a requirement of having a rubric. It's a very basic 7-step rubric. A 1 is I did not do the project, and then it scales from I put some effort into it, I impressed my friends, I impressed my neighbors, I impressed my family, I impressed my teacher, I impressed myself is where it ends. And being able to put the onus on that learner-centered is important. And what's great about Gary, having taken graduate level courses from him and then having been able to work with him in various capacities, he treats a 60-year-old student the same that he would treat a 60-year-old student. They have the same expectations on that level, that we're expecting excellence, and we're expecting that excellence to be through the motivation, and then they're working through, and the job of the educator is to fill those knowledge gaps and provide the space for learning. The problem is as they get older and they have more expectations of what the formal system would be, then they want it to fit in. And Gardner talks about that we do a job of seeing people parrot rather than seeing people provide evidence of insight. And the thing about providing evidence of insight is to have that insight moment. If we're parroting, we're not having that. But I want to turn the table because Martin wrote a fantastic blog before this called Thinking Inside the Box. And I was so happy to hear that we were going to do this together because I thought that was a great, kind of throwing disruption on its head and this idea of, burning down the castle and change for change's sake. And I was interested when I was listening to Gardner speak about kind of where you saw the distance between, or if there was any, between what he was saying and kind of that approach that you were taking, which was a more, Gardner's was obviously thoughtful. Yours was also thoughtful. I'm wondering where the congruence.
Yeah, I don't think so. If people haven't read that post, who hasn't read that post? My argument was I was kind of getting fed up with people saying let's completely, and often principals and vice chancellors like wanting to kind of completely reinvent university and this whole idea of disruption and stuff, rather than let's try to make the university, let's be better at what we do. It's like we're already quite good at stuff. Let's just be better at that. And I think technology plays a particular important role in that. So the question we could ask of technology in education is, how can we completely reinvent the system? Or you could ask, how can we do what we currently do better with technology? And you get very different solutions to those things. And I think too often, former kind of reinventing revolution is the kind of sexy stuff, and it's often what people who are headhunters and I think people who appoint people like to. It's quite boring to come into a job interview and say, I'm a pretty safe pair of hands. I'm just thinking we're going to carry on as we are with a bit of improvement. That doesn't compare well with that. Yeah, I've got a big vision for radical change. So back to your question. I think Gardner stuff would fit very much to something. He's not proposing that we kind of destroy universities. In many ways, what he's proposing is we return back to what we thought universities were supposed to be doing, and it's kind of got away from us. And I was talking this last night, so I was like, how did it get this way? It's like, it's kind of, none of us kind of came into it to be like this. With like writing learning outcomes and doing assignments that nobody likes. It's a kind of a death of 1,000 cuts kind of thing that kind of gets you. So I think absolutely, it would take. So that would be quite a radical vision, but I don't think it would be seen as a radical vision to say, if you were the vice chancellor, say, I'm going to go for more insight learning and stuff. I think innovation is another thing. People often say, we want innovation. Okay, can I room to this? Like, well, write me a 20-page plan about what you're going to get at the end of it. So it shouldn't be me talking too much. So I don't know if we want to hand over to any buddies or guests for a question or a comment.
I was having this brainstorm with everything that was said, and I hope that the keynote is available for viewing later on. But one of the things that came to mind is increasing class sizes. I know that my university is toying with the idea of increasing class sizes to 30 students per section for undergrad and 25 for grad. How does open pedagogy scale? Because I think scale is something that's on people's minds.
Let's go on this.
Well, go ahead.
Oh no, please.
Well, I can just, speaking from my own experience, and you're talking about raising class sizes, and okay, 4 years ago, contractually, we went down to that class size. So I'm used to 4 classes of 30 every semester, or 35. 35 if it's face-to-face, 30 if it's online. And I don't know. I guess I don't see any real problem with scaling. I think as I think it's the professor. It's a lot how you think through what you're going to do. I mean, you can't do this, and it depends a lot what subject you're teaching. I mean, you know, if you're doing, you know, composition 1, and you're trying to do an enormous amount of nitty-gritty word feedback, you want them to write multiple times, and yeah, 30 is 25, 30 is insane. You can't do it. But if it's like, you know, I teach economics, and much of it's conceptual, there's some problem sets we can have them do, mostly have them do that until they get the, you know, the gamma waves rolling and they have an aha. In that case, actually, some of the stuff can help because you can, you know, auto-grade stuff. But actually, I found the open stuff actually kind of helps. It's more work to think through how you want to do this. But then once it gets rolling, you know, as in the panel this morning, Robin Rosa was talking about, it kind of builds. You can, from semester to semester, you know, students can start building on what students did the previous semester. It actually, I think it can scale. I don't think it scales to any of this MOOC type stuff, like, you know, 500,000, 10,000. But you know, from economics of the teaching, you know, universities, you know, if we go from 25 to 30, it's 20% increase in productivity for the business. So pretty dramatic.
So my response to that, I come to this whole field because in 2003 I was asked to teach an online course for high school students on creative writing. And so I was given Blackboard and told, people don't do this. What are you gonna come up with? And being a face-to-face creative writing instructor at the time, one, it was very interesting to see the scaffolding that was required in an online course. But two, you know, what makes the relationship for some sort of creative medium is that two-way communication. And so my fascination, everything that I've done since then, whether it's been, you know, my dissertation was on MOOCs as a kind of social phenomenon. Now I'm studying the dark side of innovation. All of that is based on this idea that when we look at the pioneers in distance correspondence, online education, it is about creating opportunities for two-way communication, whatever that means. Having a sender-receiver and then a receiver-sender, you know, both can do the same. When that comes to creative writing, that means having the opportunity to receive feedback. And this will kind of pivot a little bit to the open pedagogy discussion where we're talking about we need to have reusable artifacts. We need to have learning materials and assessments and strategies that create something. And as a creative writing instructor, that worries me a little bit. I get some red flags there because a lot of the work needs to be process-based. It needs to be an opportunity to grow and explore. So often in workshops in that creative writing space, a student comes in with a manuscript and we're supposed to judge that manuscript because that's something they're going to take with them. And having taught, you know, from ages 8 to 80 creative writing, the best work is the work that people are willing to take chances on, which is the stuff they maybe don't want to have out there. They don't want to be the full manuscript. It's not going to be their magnum opus. So I worry about that rescalability. But again, it's about having those places for two-way communication. So the question, how do we scale? In that place, if I'm a writing instructor, I need to be able to give my opportunity to provide feedback, or class needs to be given opportunity to provide feedback. If there's the expectation that we're going to have a workshop, that you're going to come into my class and you're going to leave with a short story you're proud of, then I need to be the one to teach that. Then I need to be the one doing the feedback because I am the expert who's been given that opportunity and I will pass those things out, which means 15 students, 20 students tops. But if we're thinking about it as this is about growth and transformation, I don't care if you create a great short story in my class. I want you to be able to create great short stories when you're outside of my class. Then we can scale that up because we can provide the opportunity for that peer assessment. thing, which is one of the things that DS-106 does a great job of, is you create something, you share it in the community with creative acts. Maybe it needs to be a closed community, and then you learn from that, and as a facilitator I can have 40, 50, 60 students even, and then read over those, find some places where people are seeing some similar knowledge gaps, and then create a video or something and say, hey, here was the assignment, I see we're doing these 3 things, let's think about that as we go forward with the next one. But again, we can't ever get rid of that idea that, you know, scalability means automation. Gardner had a great comment about how, you know, pharmaceuticals have created the opportunities for medicine, which is great. But what would we be doing if we were having those conversations in psychiatry rather than, you know, just advocating to drugs? And I feel more and more we want to do the drug version of higher education, which is scale automated assessment.
Just before we go, as we say, the next session is due to start now, Tim, so I don't know if you guys want to get off there as a talk you had planned to go to.
No, I think I'm good. Again, something Rolin said, and I want to follow up on this question of scaling, and I think it speaks to us as, I hate the word, actually I hate the phrase instructional design not being more, but the idea of those of us that teach, the designers or whatever, trying to put together the whole experience. I think we downplay specific technology in the user experience too much when we get into questions. And what I'm thinking about, for example, trying to pull together what Gardner was talking about, my own experience. I teach a one section class each year, U.S. economic history, and it's a totally online class. I've been doing it for about 6 years, and so I did it for a while in our LMS Angel. Then I did it. We switched over to Desire to Learn, and I did it there. And then about 2 years ago, and one of the things I had was, it was folks are basically reading 3 texts. They're very in parallel. There are 3 very different texts. One's a working man's history of the U.S. Another one's the standard, oh, aren't we lucky that all these great white males did all this wondrous stuff for us? And the third one is something only an economist would love. And I would have discussion questions, and I was trying to come up with prompts, critical thinking questions, and I was just getting the parroting that Gardner did such a good job of mocking. And I was frustrated. It would require a lot of feedback on my part to try to probe and try to get some sort of light bulb to go on there, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. So I switched over to having the discussion on a WordPress site using the WordPress P2 theme, which basically is just kind of mimics a Facebook interface. And I just backed off even on the prompts, and I just said, okay, here, just read the books, and every week I want to make sure you got to post something. It could be a one-liner, but you got to do like 4 or 5 posts a week, just whatever is popping in your head when you're reading the textbook. And I just left it at that. And it was something about the interface and removing that critical thinking prompt. All of a sudden, I was getting aha moments. Yeah. And I'm reading through, and students are drawing connections between, oh, this indentured servant stuff 200 years ago, I'd never heard of this. You know what? This is actually just like American student loans. And they started drawing all the connections, and going, wow, I can't pay for this. So we have to make sure that the technology and the interface doesn't get in the way. And when it happens, I think it can scale.
So I don't know if there's any other. I can't read the text on the side.
Yeah, I got a question for you guys.
Sure.
Let's see if I can get it there. Great stuff. That last one. Those of us who are gathered here, both virtually or physically, I think we've all got a sense of what perhaps the philosophy of open might actually mean to us all. I was wondering what the panelists thought, how they respond to encountering when you encounter the fear of open that you might get either from students or from faculty or teaching staff. I'm assuming that you're going to interpret what I mean by that.
Yeah, sorry, Don. Do you mean in terms of releasing their own material, or putting students out in the open, or which kind of take?
Well, I suppose that's kind of interpret that as you like. I mean, there's I've just emerged. I was running a workshop this afternoon on blogging, and we were drawing comparisons between academic writing, peer-reviewed, going through the journal filters, that kind of stuff, with writing for blogs, which there's an automatic assumption that there's an audience there, whether anybody actually reads the posts or not. There's an assumption that you're writing out in the open, and with that comes a certain sort of fear. So the people who are thinking about writing in this open space, it inhibited how they approach their writing in some ways. So I appreciate lots of people will interpret fear of open in lots of different ways, but it could be faculty saying, I'm not going to license my materials because I own it or the institution owns it. It might be students being uncomfortable about writing out in the open, a range of different ways. It's kind of, what are your interpretations of fear of open, I suppose?
I really like that, the way that you prefaced that. And just a little bit, if you look at the Open Ed calendar and all the different listings of things, of topics, and Martin alluded to this, there was a problem last year, is that there was a belief that we were so focused on OER as seen as open or free textbooks, that the movement had moved so much into this direction, in part because there is a lot of success happening around that, and in part because it's a very important thing. There is an opportunity to create a cost savings. So that's great, but the problem there is, then what are we leaving behind? And I think the question you ask is one of those things that doesn't get asked enough. If you look at the criticism section of Open and OER, there are only two panels that are going to be about it, and two of the people in this room make up those two panels. I have one, and Martin and his team have the one after. So this is something that needs to be thought about when I'm doing my work. So before I was the director of innovation, I was the director of educational technology, and one of my big things was create open materials at my school for the public good, because students were paying for my team of designers through their tuition, and then my designers were building artifacts for textbooks that my students were having to pay for a second time. So how did we get through that? And faculty were saying, well, this is great, but for me to have my service component or my scholarship component or for tenure review, I can't be publishing open because open is not rigorous enough as my department thinks. So having that conversation with faculty, I think, is easier, and that's a very difficult thing to do. I run into a lot of difficulty with both my faculty as well as my administration, who, we received a large grant to create some learning resources, and I said, well, let's turn them into a class. And the first thing they thought is, oh, we can monetize this class. We can make it a MOOC. It's like, as soon as we do that, we're losing everybody. But as soon as we decide we're going to monetize a MOOC, we're going to have 15 people registered, we're going to have paid way too much money for these resources. Yet I think that's easier than the second part of your concern, which was, how do we work with students who might not necessarily want their work in the open? And I think that I'm very excited that we saw a celebration of open pedagogy. But open pedagogy and this kind of discussion gives this idea that there is a certain way to engage, that the star of the show, so to speak, is the one who wants to have it out there. Learning is a very personal experience, and while we create a lot of great things through two-way communication, we need to allow that to be personal a lot of times. Blogs might be good for some and not for others. Wikis might be good for some and not for others. So I think open needs to be thought about in many ways how David Wiley talks about as, reusable prompts and reusable assignments, rather than let's, put our students' work out there in the open for everybody to see and judge based on that.
I think it's a very good question you asked there. I guess, and as Rolin was talking, three things popped in my mind. My experience is that students are actually much less afraid of it, particularly if depending on the course you have, like if they're writing a blog or something, they have an option of, configuring it so their real name doesn't display. They can display a pseudonym type thing, so that in case Google, gets into the internet memory, it's not necessarily them. I've actually found students, I think, a little bit less afraid than I expected. I have found more fear. I found the greatest fear, I think, among administrators. And when I've explored it, is I don't know that it's a fear of openness, it's a fear of loss of control. their loss of control, or they're perceived that the faculty are losing control of the learning experience, type of thing. And now part of that may be my experience is slightly colored because being an economist, I have the advantage, and I don't know how it is in a lot of other fields, but like in publishing, as Paul Krugman puts it, you only go look at an economics journal. That's the tombstone. That's where the issue's dead by the time it gets published in a journal. Because in economics, everything is actually, the conversation is actually happening in everybody's blog. And that particularly turned the corner with the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. And it's actually kind of neat. And as I teach students, it says, this is a big transformation. It used to be academic issues that were only discussed in the lunchroom at the University of Chicago are now being hashed out in public, and you can actually contribute or at least read or be part of it. So, and I wonder to some degree if some of the fear of the open stuff isn't a somewhat generational thing.
I think that loss of control is
I have a follow-up question to that, if I may.
Sure.
Would you think that, or would you say that fear of losing control could be like the greatest challenges, or from the greatest challenges that institutions face when they're deciding to go open, or do you think that there's a bigger or more serious challenge out there for people to start going open? Like, what is the greatest obstacle when you start moving in that direction?
Well, based on a sample of one, I'd say it's the greatest challenge. Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right to pick up on that, Nadine. It's and it's not a false fear in any way. People can lose their job if you're doing stuff in the public domain and you say the wrong thing, or if it goes wrong publicly. We saw this a lot of early moves. Anything go wrong publicly, and everyone gets to see it's gone wrong, and that costs people their jobs. So I think there is a kind of fear around doing that. So we revert back to kind of what we know. And the same goes for institutions. Just to go back to the earlier concept, when they talk about they want innovation, but actually that's in conflict with also a kind of increasingly rigorous regulation environment and need to kind of control what it is they do in order to make their money, really. So
a colleague of mine had an interesting insight that, speaking about the fear of open, especially as it remained with faculty, was she was positing that the truth is that even those of us, and I relate to this myself, is even if those of us might have objective evidence that we're good teachers, the students are learning. There's still, I know I go into class and for a lecture or something like that, and I know I'm a good lecturer, but still for that first 60, 120 seconds, and I'm looking out at there, and there's all those eyes looking at me, and I'm going, oh my God, they think I know what I'm talking about, and I feel like, oh, geez, yeah, I'm going to be found out, and then there's that flash thought of, thank God the door is closed and nobody ever finds out what happens inside this room. I can pretend to be great outside the room. But when you start doing things open, everybody actually sees what you're doing. And that can be, especially if you're one of the early ones doing it and everybody else is still... yeah, oh, really? Yeah. I mean, I've been afraid of people actually saying that to me, but nobody's done it yet. But maybe they're just not paying attention.
Well, that's an interesting, one of the things that I've chosen to write about at my own peril is our obsession with good failure. This idea that failure is a good thing, something that we should celebrate. When education has so many words that we could use for what we mean when we say failure. We can call it trial and error or problem-based learning. But we love failure, and in the same way Martin was talking about kind of innovation, or a disruption is the Silicon Valley word, and innovation kind of I just wrote as a siren call. As what we want to have in this place of procedure, failure is the same sort of aspect. We want to celebrate failure, but when the MOOC goes wrong in public, then things go, things shake down in a very difficult way for people underneath the surface. And when we're thinking about this space in open, that's a big problem for administrators to deal with. But I think it's wrong, or at least for me, so as a sample of one, it would be wrong for me to value that as more problematic than for a faculty member who's dealing with that on their level, or for a student who's dealing with that. I think it's important to note that this embracing of open, and we are here for a reason. This conference has grown because there is something we believe in behind this word and this topic and the people who work on it. There are struggles for every, I hate the term stakeholder, but it's the one I'm going to use right now, for every stakeholder in that process. And for those people, it's going to have that sort of weight. I work on the administrative side now, and so I want to be more concerned about that weight for faculty and for students than I am for an administrator, because there are plenty of people who are worrying about it on the administrative side.
If there's one more question from the crowd, if not, I'll let these good people go. Lisa, I just want to say I was hoping to see your dog today. So where's the dog?
Oh, she's right here. She's ready to say hi.
We need to see the dog.
Oh, can you see?
Hey!
She's been listening a lot, taking it all in, and yeah.
My dog is surprisingly knowledgeable about MOOCs.
Ready to do some open sharing because he has very little fears or barriers. So yeah.
That's the great part. On a MOOC, no one knows you're done.
That's right. So are there any other questions to come from people out there? If not, we can wrap up, I think. Good. Well, it's great chatting with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. I'm back at 12:30, so I'll see some of you again then.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of the conference to chat with us. Very thought-provoking, and I'll have to come back and listen again.
If any of you have any further questions or anything other triggers on you, you know, feel free to get a hold of me, or I'm sure Rolin. You just Twitter. You can get a hold of me Twitter or something. EconProf, PROPH.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Definitely to going back and listening to this again, so you guys can stay tuned for more questions from you on Twitter.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Great
Thank you all.
to see you. Bye.
All right. Well, that was exciting. What did you think? What did you take away? What's your big takeaway? Or a big question?
I think for me personally, it's that the fear of being in the open and the fear of failing openly. As an instructor, as an institution, as a student, we all have that fear, and being in the open, you know, it's a balance that we're going to need to kind of, or paradox we need to be comfortable in. It's a challenge.
It was an interesting one to come out and see that that's something kind of universally shared as well. The fear of failing, the fear of doing this kind of stuff in the open. I was reminded of while we were having the conversation of something that we have at our institution. We've rebuilt a lot of our learning spaces over the past few years, and pretty much by default now, every new classroom space tends to have a glass wall. So I'm seeing that as a kind of post-internet architecture, if you like, where we're kind of used to the notion of openness that comes from interacting in the online space, and that's now starting to translate into the physical space, fishbowl, as you say in the chat there. So there's very much a sense of teaching in the open, in the actual classrooms there, because everybody that's walking past can see what's going on. You know, you can have a look in, you can have a look out, and it's quite interesting that openness is not just something that we do with the computer now.
This aspect of open reminds me a little bit of the romanticized view of ancient Greek learning, learning out in the agora, and then people walk by. But you've got the philosopher and his students sort of in this area where they're talking and discussing, and but it's still out in the open. Obviously, the philosopher or teacher who's out in the open doesn't care or mind that there are other people around. It's very interesting. I tell people that I only know so much. If they're looking at me for the font of all knowledge, then they're probably in the wrong place.
Of course, we think these days that there is an argument that the industrial era was actually a brief gap of more private spaces, and that prior to that, things were a lot more public and open anyway, even going all the way as far back as ancient Greece. And we had a brief window where things were a bit more private. Perhaps we're going back to default open as a default public thing now.
I like that part that they. I also like that part, Helen, that they talked about the failure and how people are afraid of failing openly, and I completely agree that that's one of the major things. And when he was talking about the classroom, like that happens to me all the time. If I'm giving a training or anything, I always like doubt myself, and that self-doubt, like one of the things that makes it easier is knowing that other people out there feel the same way. But I wouldn't have known that if it weren't for openness, and it's like just this spiral of feeling better about what you're doing, and it also, like, if people aren't open, if I'm not getting acquainted with these things, there won't be that self-validity or knowing that what you're doing is right, and you also won't know if what you're doing is wrong as well. I mean, that self-development or professional development or any of these things wouldn't really be that possible or that easy. I mean.
Yeah, I'll just jump in for a second off that. It's interesting because it seems like open is built so much on trust, and you have to get your students to trust you. You have to get your students to trust themselves, but you have to model that. But we're all still, deeply flawed and insecure about so many things, but we have to keep on moving past that. So it is like this very interesting cycle that it feeds itself, and then it also kind of heals itself in the same process. But just being confident enough to jump into that is kind of what you need to start, but it's a tricky process for sure.
And I'd like to expand on that and say have students trust in each other. One of the challenges that I have, and I don't know if other people face this, is I like working in groups, and it's not the easiest things at times, but I try to encourage that in learners because I think they'll learn much more by working with others. But then invariably, there are always about 10% of the students are like, I'm a busy individual. I came to this class because I want to learn these 5-10 things. I don't have time to work with others, or I had my good faith in them and they haven't gotten back to me, or they're off vacationing, or whatever. So I'm trying to think about trust exercises and building the trust on a student-to-student way. I haven't come up with anything, but if you think of anything, do tweet it out.
So I was also thinking about trust, and I have a background in the K-12 sphere, so I was thinking, like, so many in higher education in the community colleges were struggling with trust, especially around grades, and I was thinking, I wonder how, like, when I looked at my kindergarten students, they don't have any problem with grades or trust. And it's as you move through, it's kind of like third grade, fourth grade, things kind of start to change. So it's interesting to see how the impact of all of education might then now impact what's happening in higher education too. So I was thinking about that as the gentlemen were talking.
So with that, I want to see if there are any final thoughts, and then I will take us off the air. I see nods, no final thoughts. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists for joining, our on-site buddies who are no longer here, but I'd like to thank them anyway, and everybody who watched and is watching. We'll keep tuned for additional OpenEd 16 virtually connecting sessions. Until then, be well.